Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session, second week of Agentic Research course. Uh, my name is Said Yahya Shirazi, and I'm going to talk about setting up Claude Code for research. So, since we have our audience probably grew about tenfold, it's good to have like a recap of what happened last time, and then we move forward with what we're gonna do and how to set up our cloud environment. Last week we talked about Git, which is a version control on your machine, basically to track what exactly you're doing, and in the case that if you want to go back and see anything happening, you want to refresh or see the history, or actually you want to undo something like on your research or on the code that you're developing. GitHub is the online platform that stores this history. So instead of having it local, what happens is that you basically upload this history and the files associated with it to GitHub, and then you can store it there to be safe. But at the same time, it's a very good method or way for making the evaluations, and then also collaborations. Basically, what's going to happen here is that uh, if you have collaborators, they can review the code, they can create issues for further enhancing or fixing a bug, and then they also can make a change and request a pull request, do a pull request, which is basically merging their changes to the main basically branch or the main repository that you have. The terminal that we talked about is a text interface where Claude Code lives. I basically use Ghosty. We talked about Ghosty, but any terminal that you have and you use is completely okay. Basically, it is the shell or the environment that you put the commands and it runs on your computer. I talked briefly about the GitHub CLI or GH and the differences, with Git. But here, basically, GH CLI is another command line to interact with the cloud environment, not the Git itself. And the whole vision is actually that the GH and Git to be complementary. So they have a little bit of overlap, but not much. And usually, like the commands that can work one place usually is not replaced by the other. So, for example, when you want to add things that you have made change, you have a repository and you want to add like the changes to your history. You first stage it using git add, and dot means like current directory, and then when you commit, it becomes part of the history. And then when you do the git push, it pushes to the GitHub or the remote environment and cloud that you have. And with log, you can see what happened in the past, like what commits and the history that it is happened in the past. So it is important that you use a good commit message, which is /m here, and then a message, because in the log, basically you can see a one-line system as well of version of that, which is just the commit message. Instead, on GitHub, basically you can, with GH, you can create an issue, you can create a PR, you can add a comment to the PR, you can close a PR and merge a PR. At the same time, there are some things that are quite the same or copied. One of them is like cloning a repository and copying it locally. You can do it with Git as well, but at the same time, it is a little different because the access and basically the permissions that you have here is more robust and easily managed than having it in Git. And then also, if you, for example, there's an issue and you want to work on the issue, if you do git gh issue develop and the number of the issue, basically it creates a branch. And if you add a -- checkout, basically it will copy the branch and checkout. So it switches the branch to your main branch or your current branch to this branch that has this is created for this and linked to this issue, and you start working on that. For more information on what the branch is and why we do use the branch, please look at the previous week. There is the video as well as a blog post for that as well. So you can see you're gonna basically like watch it on YouTube, or if you have questions, we are on Discord, so you can look at it there as well. But the main topic here this week is about Claude Code. And Claude Code is basically like an agent that codes or programs for us and reads and writes and can run and can iterate things until it reaches our objective. So Claude Code is not an autocomplete or a chat GPT. It's not a copilot like VS Code that autocompletes a sentence or a line for us. It is an autonomous agent that reads that starts with reading the entire project, and it starts understanding the structure. It writes and edits the code across multiple files. It runs in the terminal. It runs the terminal commands, and that's one of the reasons or wisdom that Claude Code lives in the terminals, because when it lives in the terminal, it can just fire up different commands there. Then it creates Git commits, branches, and pull requests, because again, it has access to the terminal, so it just run the Git commands basically. And then one of the advantages that like actually it has, and quite recently, like 6 months ago or so, was implemented really deeply, is planning. So when something, a feature or some research development is needed to have multiple steps, or there is a complication there, it goes into the plan mode and plans a multi-step implementation, and basically hashes out everything, does the research, look at the repo if needed, look at the web pages, the outside knowledge, and then creates a plan, and then it starts working on implementing that plan. And when you have basically a good test or good success conditions, it iterates and iterates until it passes the tests. And that's really important. And that's the part, actually, like the main part that I will try to push you and push us here in this course to create an understanding of what is needed for a successful agentic workflow. And usually it is that is a very clear question, a very complete and thorough plan, and a very well thought out tests and success criteria. So basically what happens here, as I mentioned, is that you describe what you want, and Claude Code figures out how to build or how to do it. But with that description of what you want, it means that you need the goal, the plan, and the tests and the success criteria. So Claude overall has an ecosystem. It's not just Claude Code. There is a Claude Chat, which is the Chat GPT, usually like a version, and it works in browser, mobile. It has an app, and basically you upload the file. Usually, sometimes it creates a file also that you can download. There is Claude Code that we just talked about, and that works in the terminal. Right now, there is actually an app, a desktop app as well, and there is a web version of that actually like creates a virtual machine in the cloud, and it starts working. It will usually have or wants full read and write access, and it basically starts coding. And Claude Cowork is a newest product, but it's basically if you wrap Claude Code into an app and then let it work on your computer and get access to like some specific folders or browse the internet, basically that becomes a Claude Cowork, and you can also chat with it. Basically, Claude Code can do all of this as well, but it is more in the terminal terms. But Claude Cowork has a little more polish. Just remember that the focus of this course is Claude Code. Cowork is basically very useful if you want to, I don't know, like fill in some forms or look up for some available tickets, or doing some spreadsheet manipulation, for example, on your device. But we were not going to do this here. Claude Code, as I mentioned, can live in many places. The default one is a terminal, but at the same time, it can live in other places like the VS Code and cursor. You can have a Claude Code a plugin, and which basically 99% or 95% basically is very similar to the terminal. It has some shortcomings because of the VS Code environment to run things in parallel. But at the same time, you can see the differences or differential lines that it makes in the code changes in VS Code, which would be quite nice. The desktop app can work locally, so can access your local repositories, or can work on the cloud as well. And that's like again a nicer wrapper over the terminal version. The web is basically a version of the desktop app that does not have any local access. Instead, it can work on your repositories that are public, or you can give it access to private repositories that are on GitHub. And especially if you do not need access, or you do not need to provide any specific data sets or data that is like local or has gated access, then it can actually work on the cloud as well. Something that we're not going to cover or even think through is the JetBrains products like PyCharm, IntelliJ, and others that are very, very performant. But at the same time, I think our environment or our user base has not worked on as much as I surveyed, like with just simple questions. There is also, I want to mention that there is third-party apps that basically make a skin out of for Claude Code that are pretty good. One of them is Conductor. Conductor is a very nice app, I think, that basically, let me show you here, that shows basically creates a environment that is like specific to agentic coding. It can be Claude Code, it can be Codex and Cursor and others. You can see that like on the left, you have your agents at different locations, basically, like here at your different folders and sessions at different folders. They call it workspace. Can be like different. And then on the, so if you click on any of them, you get to see the chat. And actually there is nice representations of the diffs in line as well. Then here you see the changes or the git changes. So the folder changes is pretty nice as well. And then here it gives you a terminal as well to run things or type things fast. So I think for researchers or for people who want to do just a simple single on small multi-session workflows, this is a quite nice environment and quite friendly. I believe that it is only available for Mac, but at the same time, I believe it should there might be other solutions as well, like this one if you search for other platforms. Let me check if it is just only for Mac. It seems that it is for Mac, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go. So basically, as we noted here, all official surfaces that we have, like here, all share the same engine. So basically, any setup that we do, like Claude.md that we're going to talk about, or the model context protocol servers that we're going to again talk about later in this session, they all can work and will work very nicely in this whole environment. Basically, like if you want to look at it, this is the session with VS Code that the plugin will come up and get like one half of your screen, and then basically you type here, and then the changes will happen here, and you will see the changes on the other half of the screen. This is also like the Claude Code that is available on the app, and that can work locally or on the cloud. Just note that just recently, I think as of yesterday, this tabs moved to this to the left pane. So, and they are just icon based, so you can just switch there. Okay, so to get started, we need to do some things. One, for sure, for installation, and then make sure that everything is authenticated and permissions. But the next is like the setup that we're going to do. So for installation, if you are on a Mac OS, the native installation that they recommend is to do a CURL, and then basically get the binary from Claude, and then just run it. You can also, if you have access, whether it is a Linux or Mac OS, we can also install using brew. Sorry, and then on the Windows PowerShell, you can also install from PowerShell as well. There are you can go also to the help and see like if there are other ways, but I think like I think like the most important ones are these two. For Windows users is this one. So once you did that, just what you want to do is just change the directory to your project and type Claude. Here, for example, cd means change your directory, and go to your project, and means just follow with the next command, and the next command you can just type Claude and it will start. And the native approach, which is here, basically installs, it always auto updates. The homebrew versions basically requires manual upgrade, and for the upgrade you just type brew upgrade, for example, Claude Code, and it will upgrade that for you. And that's about it. So once you are in Claude Code, one thing that happens is that it becomes like if we want to prevent it to change things without we explicitly asking it to. So basically there is a permission model for it. One is the default is that for any changes or any commands that it's going to run asks and creates a question and you need to respond. But that becomes really frustrating and repetitive. So usually like what it can do is that you can accept edits. So it starts auto-approving edits and then file system commands basically. And that becomes the part that it starts to ask you questions. And if you say always allow, so there are 3 types of like answer. One is yes, well, the other is yes always, and the last one is no. But if you do it yes always, basically it starts learning or just adding to the dictionary of what should be always accepted. And also the edits to the files becomes accepted by default as well. Planning actually prevents the edits and just makes it to read and not change anything, because we want to just think about how to implement, and that's not the stage of making any edits. There is an auto mode now as well for the Sonnet and Opus 4.6 plus. Sorry. And that basically adds another agent that looks into your basically question, and if it is safe, it just let it run and accepts it for you. But it's only available for the team and enterprise. So basically the idea, and it is not right now available for the personal plans. To do this, like change from default to auto accept or plan, you can just basically cycle with Shift Tab. And then if you're on a team plan, just enable auto mode will work for you. And that's gonna be it. Okay. Now is basically, now we know how to install and how to accept or just let it accept and work. Now we need to provide enough information to our repository so it can basically do understands the repository and does not need to, every time that we open it, it starts from scratch. And that's by having the CLAUDE.md file. Okay, and what is CLAUDE.md? The CLAUDE.md is a markdown file, hence the MD file, MD suffix, that is has persistent instruction that gives the Claude the option or the enough information how to interact with this repository. Claude reads it at the start of every session, and it's always in the context. So basically, you write it or you ask Claude to write it, and then it guides the Claude behavior. Usually, a good CLAUDE.md makes this generic AI tool already that we have to an expert or a research assistant that knows enough about your project. So you can think of it as a briefing that you always provide to a new team member until like they become on board. And to make a good CLAUDE.md, it is always good to run the init command to generate a starter, and then you review it and you refine. So for example, like if I do the init command here, and this is just like I added, hey, let me know what exactly you do with init command, and it provides the steps that it does. So in step 1, it discovers this existing configuration. So it looks to in all of, if there is a previous CLAUDE.md or cursor or GitHub or anything else. And then it also scans the project structure, the code and everything. And then the tests, lints and everything, and then basically creates or updates the CLAUDE.md. And this does it for you. I want to note before we go here that in our research skills this one, we have a similar in the project plugin. We have a similar basic command. It is called init project, and init project actually also has the initialization like that, but at the same time it adds a lot more basically concepts or files, but that we're going to cover very soon. Okay, so one thing that is pretty interesting and exciting about CLAUDE.md is that Claude respects the hierarchy here. Basically, you can have CLAUDE.md in many places, and it will basically pull all of them together and then respects all of them with the importance or the priority to the downward most standard Claude.md. For example, if you have it in your project repository, and then you have one in like your Git folder or your master project folder or your lab folder, and then you have one at the user level, which is at the and you have one at the basically user level, which is at your home directory under Claude, then basically it aggregates all of them. Also, if you have you have a team, you can also impose, like for your lab, for example, you can impose a Claude.md as the organization, and it will be always loaded as well. So basically, the project Claude would be the team standard, the lab standards, and the user ones are the personal ones that you're going to use. If you add it to the local.md, it will get ignored basically. But if you just remove the local and just add it to this directory, Claude.md, you can or you cannot get ignored. But I used to ignore them, but for public projects, right now I always retain it. So if others are gonna help me with the projects, I want them to know how the project is structured, so their agents also understand it. So as probably a rule of thumb or just like experience, what to include is basically how to build and test commands, how to, or what is your project or your user level coding style, which are not the default ones. Probably you have your style that's probably a lot different from the default Python or MATLAB or other languages that you use, and then you can add it here. Sometimes you have some etiquette or rules for how to naming the branches or how to have the PR conventions like pull request comments. For example, I have this rule that never use an emoji there, or the branch names should be always less than 50 characters, and that's something that to choose and add it here. Any architecture decisions for your repository can be here, especially like on the high level. If it is like details, we're going to talk where to put it later on in the context folder. And then common gotchas or some things that always like you see that the LLM or the agent struggles, you can add them here. Remember that usually like Claude.md or agents understand all caps or importance of the importance of boldface or italics and so forth. So if you do all caps, never do something, it conveys it is important. And never do this is actually quite an effective way of creating or communicating a rule. When things are at the highest, like up top, it also conveys importance as well. What to exclude is basically things that Claude can infer from the code. For example, if it is Python and you are following the PEP, for example, standards, it is already inferred. Again, standard language conventions are not needed, especially if they are the recommended ones. Any documentation of the APIs are not needed. Probably you can just link to the documentation or just ask or just make it if it needs always, it can go and read the help as well. And the information that changes frequently is also important not to put here. Again, we're going to talk where to put it, but at the same time, usually like we should keep Claude.md as like less frequently changed. And also like having long tutorials or long sessions or long write-ups actually is not helping because basically it just divides the attention of the agent to probably sometimes unneeded or unnecessary information. If there are some practices that are self-evident, or just if they do it, it causes a warning, you do not need to mention it either. Rule of thumb is that usually keep the Claude.md less than 200 lines. It's not that if it gets longer, it becomes like useless, but at the same time, my experience is that you can always mention things into 100 lines. Many times that more than 200 lines is usually like us talking excessively. But at the same time, if your rules are concise enough and still goes beyond 200, I think it's all fine. Okay, so the next one is actually having rules. And having rules are pretty important. If you can put it under Claude or under the root here, it's okay wherever you want to put it. And I like usually to have it under the root actually. but usually like basically you have the Claude and like settings and things go there, but then you have Claude.md and then rules. The rules are basically like things that are or things that usually like you do not want it to be always loaded, but to access on demand. You put it on another markdown, and from the other markdown, you just put it a line in Claude.md, and if you use our skill and plugin, it actually does that for you. And say, hey, for example, coding style rules are in this document, or testing or security is in that document, for example. So we put it here like for Python styles or for test and continuous integration and so forth. The advantage of like having a different separate rules is that you can also have path scoped system. So for example, you might have some rules that just applies to your API documents or the API files, or to only your TypeScript files, for example. Then you can have specific files that works like that. And that's actually pretty powerful. So then basically Claude understands when it is in a certain path, it should look up these rules and not looking to other documents, or not looking to this document when it is working on other paths. We should also talk about agents.md, I think. Agents.md is basically a response of the community to Claude.md, because it seems that like the usage of Claude is about 50% of the whole agentic coding. So the rest, basically the rest of the teams and solutions provided like an open source standard called agents.md, and basically it is very similar to Claude.md. Claude Code, just remember that reads Claude.md and not agents.md. But agents.md is pretty good to make sure that your code is accessible for everyone that does agentic coding. So basically, if the repo that you are working on, or your repo uses agents.md for any other tools, you can just import it. And for any document, to import the whole document, another document inside, you can just use an @ sign, and that's another powerful thing here. And it just gets imported all together. And then if you have a specific command for Claude Code, you just add them underneath it. So basically your Claude.md becomes whatever instructions that you have in agents.md, and with additional specific instructions. And that's a powerful thing. And it works everywhere else. Anywhere that you want to import the whole information, you just put @ sign and then the path of the file, and it will import it. This is a note that, for example, the rules or rule files, probably I believe that it should not be imported like this into Claude.md. The reason is that we do not want to have the whole rule set for different use cases to be all of them imported to Claude.md. We want it to be accessed on demand, and that's why like we add just, hey, like one line or one bullet point that the rules for developing in Python is, for example, at this path, and the rules for developing MATLAB or testing MATLAB scripts are at that path, and so forth. Okay, so to extend, so far talk about how Claude Code works, which is an agent that needs to know about our repository and needs to know how we work and follow our rules. But at the same time, it doesn't have much tools. It can learn and use the command line interface and APIs and so forth. But at the same time, if we provide it with some tools and skills and instruction, it can work much more effectively. And that's where the plugins come in. Plugin is a new name that basically they added as a amalgamation and having everything onto a system of being portable, or being packageable in a sense. So you can have agents, hooks, and skills that are under plugins. And at the same time, you can have also servers. Servers can also become wrapped in a plugin. They can be also model context protocol servers can have their own system as well. But these are different than Claude.md and auto memory. So usually, like what these are basically pulled on demand, but these are always loaded basically. So as I mentioned, the plugins are distributable packages. Skills are workflow knowledge that basically you can refer to like many times. Hooks are the parts that are just hooks are automated actions, like checking, I don't know, if there is any basically failures or linting problems before pushing, for example. And agents are basically isolated workers that can work with side tasks and make sure that your main session is clean and not diluted, or basically everything is like very separated, so you can work on that. Model context protocols basically connect this session and this agent to outside tools. Useful ones are, for example, a Maths app connector that we have, and we're going to talk about it like in 2 weeks, I think 2 or 3 weeks. And also, it is, for example, a Chrome MCP that you can connect to a browser and see what the browser is doing and interact with the browser. So a little bit of any of them, all of them, like let's talk about them, is that skills, as I mentioned, are reusable workflows. And that means that whenever we need it, it just goes and understands it, and it knows that it has this skill, but doesn't know what's inside. So you can store it under Claude skills if it is like on the project level, on the repo level, or you can do it on the user level. It just gets installed there. Basically, as I mentioned, Claude loads it on demand, not every session. You can also invoke it with a skill name, or just Claude tries to auto-detect it from the context. It can include supporting files, multiple like different specializations within the skills, templates, scripts, examples, other markdowns, and so forth. Usually, like the bundled skills that are available for Claude Code are simplify, batching, debugging, looping, and like these different things. Also, like the PR review, I think is now by default added to. So if you have a PR and then you want to pull request and you want to review it, there is a skill that I think that's a skill, or that's an agent. There's a plugin actually, like a preloaded. But at the same time, you can read it, and it can basically evaluate the PR and the code changes there. Again, to just reiterate, skills are different with CLAUDE.md because CLAUDE.md are facts that are loaded every session, but skills are procedures that are loaded on demand. So basically, if you have instructions that not every session is needed, you just push them to skills. There is actually like a skill development skill that you can tell it to create a skill from your instructions, for example, and then just summarize that and then just push it into the skills portion and just make your Claude.md shorter. Model context protocols are one of the creations or open source creations that Anthropic and Claude did to connect to external tools. It's an open standard, basically for a communication between the AI and other tools. To add an MCP, basically you just either use the Claude command when you have it installed, or much easily you add the settings of the MCP, which usually all the MCPs have it. I can show you here on lab MCP tools. Hopefully I have it here as well. Like here, this one. You can add this to your folder and it will read it and it will understand and basically load the MCP. It is pretty nice. Sorry. Okay. Some of the good MCPs that probably you might want to use, and we will use it like throughout the course, is Serena. Serena is actually a combination of some memories about the project plus language server protocols. Basically, if you have worked with VS Code, you've seen autocompletes or IntelliCode that completes looks at the variables and see where the variables are, where the functions are. That's powered by language server protocol, which is open source by Microsoft. And basically, Serena has those involved. So searching becomes much faster, and it has memory as well, memory documents. Actually, like now, Claude also implements LSP servers. It's not yet finalized, but you can activate it and use it for hierarchical event descriptors, which is like our standard at the Short Center that we introduced at the Short Center for labeling and annotating neuroscience experiments. Now it has an MCP, so you can try and ask an LLM to annotate your experiments or your event files, and at the same time, it can validate it for you and then move forward. And then there is, for example, the thing that we were going to talk about is MATLAB MCP tools, which is basically going beyond just running code or running in the terminal. Because if you have a good CLI like the GitHub or, for example, Git by itself, it's not really useful to have an MCP because you can have Git help and it shows all the help that you need, or GH also the same. it is important. MATLAB has also a good command line interface. What is going to help here is that if you have, for example, specific things that you can do that is not available there. For example, with MATLAB, it is hard to get the figures plotted and then understand the figure, or it is hard to sustain the workspace and run every section by itself. And that's the parts that probably MATLAB MCP tools going to help us, and we're going to see how it's going to help us. There are also other general tools like Google Drive, Notion, Jira, Slack, and tool MCPs for manipulating databases that you can see and find and search and use them. As I mentioned on our practicum, basically later on, I think in 2 weeks, we're going to use MATLAB MCP tools to understand and drive EGLab to use to develop our pre-processing pipelines for our project that is for EEG analysis of the healthy brain network data. In short, like to sum it up with the last two, hooks are automated actions. They are deterministic. It's not advisory. They just run specific commands at a specific time, and like running a linter or blocking a destructive command or formatting a code or injecting a context, for example. But agents are basically a separate, isolated worker that works on their own window, on their own history. So you provide the LLM provides it with the instructions and it starts working. You can keep the main conversation clean. It is very good for exploration, research, going to do a web search, and the respond. And you can also restrict it to specific tools and models. What happens in return is that it returns basically a report, a summary, not the raw data or not anything else. It reports what it did and what changes were made, and then it reports back to the main agent. So basically, hooks are things that will happen. CLAUDE.md is advising or just providing information that please do this. And agents means that we provide information that and ask it to do it in your own space. And so by this, it means that everything here are just text-based. There is nothing much on coding or anything like that. Okay, now that we know everything about that, so we know our basically how to run Claude, how to give it context about our project, how to connect it to tools, skills, hooks, and agents or run agents. Now we are at the plan mode. So if we have a project and we want to further it or just make further steps, fix a problem, or just make another basically feature out of it, we need to go to the plan mode. And plan mode is basically /plan, like here. And the idea there is that the plan mode means that you explore, you plan, and then after you plan, you become out of the plan when it is approved, and you implement and you commit, and then you do a PR and do a PR review, or you make tests and make sure your commits meets the planned goal criteria that we already designed in the plan. So in the explore section, you can see like how, like if we ask what is the plan inside, it exactly shows you that it orients itself. It starts research or explore basically, and then it starts drafting, and you can chat with it about the draft. And then once it is finished and finalized, and you review it, it starts executing. So the explore means that Claude reads the files, builds on an understanding of the aims and the history and the future and the goal criteria. If need be, it goes and do a web search and understanding the environment and landscape, and then goes with those information. It starts a planning of what needs to be changed, how it needs to be changed, what tests is required, what is the goals, and what is the exit strategy. And then once it presents that, then you have all the information to. Probably my strongest suggestion is that you read through and provide comments if needed, or if you approve it, it comes out from the plan mode and it starts implementing. And once the implementation is complete, usually it commits or starts testing, is depending on what you instruct, whether to test before committing or test after committing. And then basically, then you go to the next step, which is like usually either creating a PR or just pushing up and finishing and then going to the next session. Again, from before, we know that if you want to go to the plan mode, you can force it with having shift tab twice. or just having /plan. Okay. I think we're done almost with all general information about Claude. And then we're going to talk about a little about like our workflow that we're going to talk about here. It is specific to agentic research. But before that, we have these shortcuts to know. Basically, remember it is init to initialize and get understanding from the repository. Planning goes with the planning, basically, like it starts the planning phase. When you are done with the session, and to make sure that you not incur more tokens and clear the memory to create a new fresh session that again reads the CLAUDE.md, you just clear the whole history. If you need to still have a summary of what happened before and continue the session, you just do a compact. So it compacts the whole history and knowledge and creates a new session basically. But everything is continuous. And if you need to add something to CLAUDE.md, you can tag memory basically. And then if you need to change a model or create it, you use model. If you want to see the diffs and changes into the files, it is there. Rewind is interesting because like if you press escape twice here, these are the shortcuts, then you can actually go back into your messages and remove specific things like the last ones from the memory. And probably like if something didn't work as well and you do not want it to retain the memory of that, you just do that and then you rewind. And if you have a session that you disconnected and came back the next morning, for example, and you want to resume, you just do /resume and select that. Anthropic also provides these best practices that always include tests and have the expected outputs or even screenshots for those. And this helps ground your implementation and the agent. Also, make sure that basically you have the exploration first and the planning and then coding. Starting with the coding right away will usually like result in failure. Even like if you are in a hurry, you need to plan first because they are incentivized, like these agents are incentivized to do a fast coding and fast and loose. So it can start working without understanding the whole picture. And that becomes a problem and harder fix later on. And then also, when you're done with a session, just clear it. It helps with performance of the model, also helps with the costs. Even if you're on a max plan, the costs still aggregate. There's a usage metric there that you can hit pretty fast if you are not doing that. Okay, so our research workflow is a little different, or has some other things on top of everything that we talked about. And that goes usually like on the context and the rules folder. And we're going to talk about it. So just one note that anything that has, like in the Unix environments, like the Mac and Linux, anything that has the dot in front of it, like in the, basically is hidden. But you can always like remove it or just have it as a context folder and a rules folder. What I have, or what we designed here for this directory, is having a couple of information, like full documents that basically summarizes our overall plan, ideas, research, and so forth. So to plan like a longer project, usually like we use a plan.md, and when with the steps and phases and stages and so forth. But the ideas that are behind the hypotheses that are basically shaping this plan goes to the ideas.md, and the research that we do, literature reviews and so forth that we do from outside, for example, goes to the research.md, and the idea of the fail attempts and learnings that we made and lessons that we learned from the failed attempts goes to Scratch history. And the idea is that like if we have this summary of these things in the CLAUDE.md, it understands and reads it on demand. So the plan.md becomes the task list, and the Scratch history prevents Claude from repeating the same mistakes. Or it understands if it hits something, it reads it and understands the solution, how the solution works. So the research skills marketplace and the project plugin is especially important for this. So when you do the init project, it creates not only the CLAUDE.md, but the rules and the context folder, the plan.md and everything. But the problem is, or the point is, that usually you should have some instructions. It is not working like by itself for a empty folder. You can describe it, you can talk to it, you can write it, or you can have a markdown or a text file about the project and describe the project. And based on that, it reads it and it tries to create these documents, and then you can later on update it. And when you have, I don't know, like multiple huge development, which becomes an epic, we're going to talk about it later, or you want to have setting up continuous integration, you use the project plugin. If you want to use literature review and making sure that the review goes and reads the documents or reads the papers, finds the papers and does not hallucinate, you use OpenSite and literature review skills from OpenSite plugin. Basically, that's basically the idea of using open source and basically tools like OpenAlex, Semantic Scholar, and PubMed to find the papers, download the papers, convert them to Markdown or just a searchable text, and then reads them and then understands and add them to research.markdown or other literature reviews. For writing a grant or reviewing the grant draft that you did, and not to review a real one, although people can do that too, you can use a grant plugin or manuscript plugin. I think from my personal experience is a very good first draft, especially when you have the literature review and so forth. The scientific figure is a very, very fun one because if you use a agentic system like ChatGPT, OpenAI, or other, or Gemini, and ask it to create a figure, a scientific figure, it creates a good one, but usually like it's not repeatable. And at the same time, it's usually like, I don't know, it screws up some small place, and then if you try to reiterate, it screws up another place. So scientific figures plugin is actually the other way. It tries to identify specific, like if you ask it to create a figure for example, figure 1 of a paper or figure 2 or 3 of a paper, it tries to identify whether icons or special, basically, graphics is needed. And for those portions, runs a GPT like OpenAI image generator. But if it needs a graph or a table or a chart, goes and runs those and create those from Python or from the scripts and commands, and then pull up all of them together, and you can save it as a PNG or a PDF. If you ever have on the neuroinformatics like a converted data set to bits, these are instructions there. Or if you want to design an experiment in PsychoPy and code it in PsychoPy, it's there as well. All of the presentations that you are seeing here are being created with the presentation skill, and it also moves forward. It's a live document and a live skill. So as soon as I see like some improvement is needed, it gets added. If you see any improvements is needed on any of the plugins, just create a pull request or create an issue there, and you are more than welcome, and I will be happy to work on that as well. To install that, you just do this in the command, and then basically just install it. Install a specific research skills, for example, or first you need to add it to the marketplace. So if you look add the marketplace there, so if you look at the research skills here, you're gonna see that, for example, for installation, you first add the marketplace, and then you can install all of them or specific skills if you need it. Just in the end, just you know, and I think I want to iterate this a little more because I have a little more information. Claude Code is not available on the free plan, but with the pro plan, you start working on it. If you have a team, basically with 5+ seats, you can add them and ask them to add it. The idea about the advantage is that there is a nonprofit price with about 60% or more discount, and many of the universities, at least in the US, may qualify for that. Please check. You can apply through the Anthropic nonprofit, not Anthropic Education, but the nonprofit. And then on the premium, you can basically get about like $40 to $50, so like a half price for your team and your lab, basically. On the enterprise, it's gonna be different, and the usage is gonna be basically API systems, which can be very expensive. Basically, for organization less than 10 people, you can do that, and it's going to be very, very, I think, exciting, and there's a very good incentive to do that for your lab if you could qualify. I think the verification can be really fast with good stack. If your university qualifies for that, then basically it goes through. Education plans, on the other hand, is university-wide, so that's a little harder to convince the university to buy into that. So, but the cloud nonprofit would be a good path toward that. I think for this course, just the pro is enough. I think I still have some referral that gives you 1 week free. If you want to use it, it's in the Discord and you can get it there. So before the next session, try to install Claude and see if you have the correct current version. A current version should be above 100, so it is like 2.1.100 or above. As of today, which is April like 15 or 16, as whenever you are seeing it, run the init command into your repository. Just make sure that you have something there like a text file, or just add extra information after the init. So just /init space, and you start your instructions. And use the basically init-project skill to create context with plan ideas, etc. You can also ask Claude to create these. And then ask Claude Code to create something or do something for your research. Make sure you review your CLAUDE.md manually, and then hopefully, optionally, you install the research skills marketplace and the plugins inside. Next week, we're going to talk about project management with AI, how we do epics, sprints, work trees, and so forth. These are the resources that you can use. And then if you have any questions, I will see you in Discord. Thank you very much, and see you next week. The next week is going to be on Tuesday, by the way. Bye-bye.